St. Matthew, the 5th chapter, the 21st through the 37th verse. You have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, "You shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment." But I say to you, if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or a sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, "You fool," you'll be liable to the hell of fire. So when you're offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First, be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are on the way to court with him, or your accuser may hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and then you will be thrown into prison. Truly I tell you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. You have heard that it was said, "You shall not commit adultery." But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go to hell. It was also said, "Whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce." But I say unto you that anyone who divorces his wife, except on the grounds of unchastity, causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Again, you have heard it said to those of ancient times, "You shall not swear falsely, but carry out the vows you have made to the Lord." But I say to you, do not swear at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the great city of the King. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let your word be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything more than this comes from the evil one. The word of the Lord. You may be seated. Jesus of Nazareth, this Palestinian Jew, directs us today to the longest part of the Sermon on the Mount. You will remember that we began with the Beatitudes, and they are all most pleasant. Blessed are those, and we can feel and hear, understand, and see. And then, for the second Sunday in Epiphany, we went to the salt and the light and to the community of faith, and not to hide your bushel or your light under the bushel. So the emphasis continues in our themes for Epiphany. And so today, this series of antitheses. I had a friend in a class one day that called it the antithesis, and I guess he had a point enunciating it that way. This is about higher righteousness. It is a contrast between the old law that Jesus inherited and the new interpretation of the law. Each of them said, "You have heard it said," and then Jesus says, "But." That's a funny little word, isn't it? "But I say unto you." And that's the new law of the kingdom. So today we're contrasting the old law, and we could have gone in lex talionis, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. The old law of the Old Testament contrasted with the new law of the New Testament. Now it's not all as simple as that, because the great striations carried back and forth between the Old and the New Testament. When Jesus walked about Galilee and into Jerusalem, he knew the accepted canon. There was a body of lessons and scriptures that he accepted. We call that the Old Testament. Some people call it history of our faith. And now it's a new interpretation that Jesus wants to give us. And I want to tell you that these are darn near impossible. They're not natural. I bet that someone in this congregation has been all puffed up with anger before. Or adultery and divorce and marriage. Or we have given our word and then we've forgotten to follow through. Every pastor in every church has all those members that are all willing to serve and to polish the brass or the silver, but they seldom get it done. And yet we're all here to serve in the common body and the community of faith. So it's great that in the kingdom and in the new world of Jesus, that the grace is sufficient to move us at least toward obedience, at least to be in movement. So today we are led to self-examination. We are led to the service of others. We are led toward a moral and an ethical life, and we resist. And that is only natural. We don't want to hear it. We don't want someone invading our lives, but God struggles to accomplish the will of the kingdom. And God takes us as humans and co-workers to build the kingdom. And this community, this First Baptist Church, is one little pie, slice of the pie, one little segment of the Christian faith that represents God in this place and through our gifts to those who serve throughout the world. It is often said that a church budget is not a church budget. It is a statement of your purpose. It is a statement of what you intend. And it is often said at stewardship time that the best indication that we have of the things in which we really believe is to look at our checkbook statement. Or, in these days, look at those automatic deductions on our computers. The things in which we really believe, we support. And the things that we are not so sure about, we tend not to support or to give half-hearted belief. So today, in a quick and broad path, I'm going to deal with the four dimensions of this: anger, divorce, marriage, and oaths. Rest assured that I have the final say on all of these, and I'm sure that every one of you are looking forward to what I have to say. First, anger. Oh, how puffed up people get. And oh, how hooked, how addictive they are at times to anger. There's great power in it. Don't you feel great power when the adrenaline rushes on? And it's the only time that some people can feel good in life, can feel powerful, can feel threatening, can put somebody else down, so they move and they move and they move, and they're always just waiting to explode. And you get around those people and you walk on eggshells. Anger, natural passion. The text says it's murder of the heart. It's what's in your heart comes the anger. And if you are an angry person, you are going to go into the fires of Gehenna. Now, all through this text, 6 times, the word hell is mentioned. And it's hot enough, it's making me perspire in here. Because the sun is now coming through our windows and warming us up in the sanctuary. 6 times in this text, Gehenna is mentioned, into the fires of Gehenna. On the southeastern corner, overlooking and down from the temple, the valley of the Kedron runs through there, and then over to the side is where Moloch was worshipped in ancient times. It was a place of child sacrifice. Throughout the centuries, it was the garbage dump for Jerusalem. It burned and it burned and it burned like our garbage facilities in the old days. And it was placed where it was because it blew away from the city. And the smells were not prevalent in the city. So in this garbage dump were even the children from child sacrifices and all the garbage of the people. Now, when the text says you will be thrown into hell, originally it said you will go to Gehenna, that place of burning. I don't know of any contemporary of mine, nor of any professor of mine, that believed in a literal hell. Now, I want you to hear that clearly, because sometimes pastors get accused of believing and saying things and being misinterpreted by people. Most pastors in our denomination and denominations from there, from the middle this way, certainly do not believe in a little hell. We believe there's enough hell here, and if you want to use the word devil or Satan to emphasize that, you're welcome to do that. There is a power of evil. It is awesome, and there's enough hell on earth without looking forward to some kind of hell in the future. So the instructions are, if you are angry, and if you're on your way to Gehenna, and you come to church, and you remember that you have something against somebody, what are the instructions? Leave your gift there at the altar first. Second, go and make peace with your brother or sister and be reconciled. And be quick to do that, to make peace. For your gift is not holy if you have something against your brother or sister. It's a very serious charge, and a charge we all know to hear. Now, we need to follow that advice, don't we? And as a pastor, I remember 2 ladies one time were in such a vicious fight in the church that it upset everybody. Now, you've never known anybody like that, but I have as a pastor. And I had both families come to me, and they said, go tell X that she can't treat me this way, and go tell Y. Well, I put up with this about 2 years of both sides, and everybody in the whole church. You know, if you've studied anything at all, you know about the theory of triangulation. Don't get caught as the third party between 2 people. You know, don't get triangled. Well, they had me triangled. And I was just dumb enough that I thought that I would try to solve this conflict between these 2 ladies. Well, what do? Well, I read the Bible, and the Bible says, well, if somebody has a little problem like this with their anger, take one of the deacons or one of the elders in the church and go and solve this difficulty. And if they don't listen then to you and the elder, bring them before the church council. Well, I want you to know I never got to the second step because those people left the church. But I did exactly as the Bible said, because I was caught. And I was dumb, and I was triangled, and I got involved in their fight. And I thought that I could solve somebody else's problem. Now listen carefully to that. Let other people solve their problems. They need their insights. They made their troubles. They walked in their shoes. And don't particularly interfere. And some of you parents, I know, do that with your children. Of course, mine have never fought. But it's easy to get triangle. Anger. Make every effort to evade anger in our lives. Now, I'm not taking time to talk about healthy anger or any of that. You can make that assumption. I just simply want you to hear these words of Jesus to us, to our culture. The second is adultery, defined as lust for one another. Even lust in the heart is sinful. I remember when Jimmy Carter became president, and the journalists are always asking questions if he sinned, and he's, well, no, never really answered the question. Finally, they said, well, President, do you really sin? And he said, well, I guess I have lust in my heart. And so the next day, all the newspapers, if you remember, had President sins, commas, in his heart. So not only is lust, that is often called thraldom. I don't know if you've read the technical terms about love, but that butterfly in the stomach, that sweat on the brow, besides nervousness and incompetency, is sometimes called thraldom. That feeling that you got when you met that husband or wife of yours, or that special date in high school or college, or that special one that you wanted to meet, that's called thraldom. And in most of our lives, that leaves pretty fast. And there are people all about us that cannot live without thraldom. They have been married 3, 4, 5 times because they fall in love, and we call it falling as if we're not able to cope with it. We fall into love, and all these feelings overwhelm us, and all of a sudden all these feelings are gone, and we're looking for somebody new. And so the concept of adultery, of lust in the heart, is sinful, which leads to the third, which is divorce. Jesus had a real high view of marriage, the first miracle performed. Every judge or pastor or priest today that stands before 2 people in love and marries them, and in these days 2 women, 2 men, a man and a woman, whatever we're asked to do, we're hired gunslingers. 2 out of 3 end in divorce. 2 out of 3. 68%. Just above 2 out of 3. They have no chance. So we know and we're dealing with the best people in the world. We have Christian backgrounds. We've attended church all our lives. We're good, moral people. We're bright. We're intelligent. We have graduate degrees. And so divorce is not going to happen to us, but in my experience, more educated people got divorced than poor people. The poor people needed one another. They had to help one another. They had nothing else. But educated people have stood on their own. They have made a living independently. They really don't need one another. And so often, very soon, they part ways. Jesus honored marriage, a high view of marriage, believed it as a commitment, and thraldom, which weaves its way through our lives, moves to commitment. And that commitment is love over here. And most people cannot deal without those great feelings of thraldom in their love life. So last, oaths. We had a great example last week. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Enough said, huh? My father, my family tells me, buried Jerry Sloan's father. This past week, Jerry Sloan had always said, that's my only claim to fame, by the way, genetic blessings from my father, I guess, for doing that. Jerry Sloan was one of those kind of guys that did what he did and said, when I've had enough, I'll let you know. And what has come out in all of this are not the arguments, the fusses, the fights. What's come out in all of this was that he was a straight-up guy. Now, I could have found a woman, I'm sure, a straight-up person. He said yes and did yes. And he said no and did no. And when he said his time would come, he would know it, and he would quit. And he did, overnight. Now, that brings up an interesting question that you have had about some of your former pastors. It is said that coaches have a shelf life. That they're all interim coaches, they're only short-term. What do you think about pastors? Shelf life, interim, always moving on, hired gunslinger, let them get in and do their job and get out. And a lot of people believe that as far as pastoring. So let your yes be yes and your no be no. It is an injustice toward others not to be a person that observes their word. So these teachings take us from the superficial to the substantial, from theory to the real practice, to the real business of life. It gets right down next to our souls, and it concerns the cultivation of ourselves, and it helps us to engage in our own histories, our own stories, our own families, our own memories, to experience our own mortality, and to make sense of what it means to be alive. Thank God for the grace of God, who gives us a little slack and pulls us along gently and encourages us through our prayers and our meditations, our songs, and our worship to be better people observing these words of the Lord. In the name of Christ, amen.